May the 4th. I got you. Now I understand.
I didn't invent that, although it would have been really amazing if I had.
Yeah, you patented.
Yeah.
What do you do to celebrate? Do you get all dressed up in Chewbacca or somebody?
I didn't invent that, although it would have been really amazing if I had. Well, I don't dress up like Chewbacca on Star Wars Day because I dress up like Chewbacca all the time. So that would not be any different than what I do on a regular day. Sorry, I'm sitting one text off. I had a meeting, 2 meetings that went right into this today. Okay, there we go. So welcome everybody. May the 4th, in case you're wondering, that's what we're talking about apparently. May the 4th is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And so please next year, make sure to remember and put it on your calendar. Hello, everybody. We got a nice crowd. Welcome. Stuart, is Karen with you today? And hi, Flossie and Jeff, I think, are here. Larry and Jane. Ron has left, so I'm bringing him back. Sorry, my voice seems to be having some problems, as it does often. Ron is back with Arlene. Great.
I answered somebody's doorbell earlier, and I just heard it again, so I went running to the door for my delivery. And
got the same haircut almost. Look, I need this.
Okay. Good to see everybody, and I hope everybody's doing well. We were so happy to be about people in services this last week, but we're still going to do everything virtually. So any class we have, even if we go in person, we talked about possibly me coming up to Sun City and doing this in person, but even if we do that, we will do it online at the same time. So basically, everything we do at the synagogue, live in person, will be virtual as well from now on.
Rabbi, are you on the once a month in person, or just or all the time now?
That is something we can discuss at the end, or we can discuss it now. Are people feeling like we can do something in person in Sun City once a month? We can do that. Or we can do it and then do 3 weeks online, or just, I mean, really, I'm up for anything.
I meant services when I asked that question.
Oh, services. Yeah, we're doing services every Saturday, except for the anniversary service, which is going to be, that one's still going to be virtual. But every other service is going to be virtual and live in person on Saturday.
But you have to call up and make
you have to call up
reservation.
reserve right now. That may change. I think the numbers of people though are going to be enlarged, because before you could only come and sit with your family. Now you can sit with whoever you want.
What about masks and prayer books and things like that? And
masks are still, masks are going to be still required. We debated that last night. Prayer books are going to be used.
And socialization afterwards or none?
Socialization out. We're going to try and limit that as much in the building, but do it afterwards outside. And we're going to have Kiddush and Motzi outside as well.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
We're going to probably start having takeout meals as well.
Rabbi, if we're going to go into in person in Sun City, my suggestion is do in person starting in the fall. A lot
that could be a good idea.
Happening this summer, and I think
I'm basically going to leave this up to you guys, because I'm inoculated. I'm happy to do it, but if people aren't comfortable, then we won't. So we could start after holidays. We could not do it at all. It's really going to be completely up to what you, as long as we stream it as well, so that people who are not from Sun City, and again, mostly it's there's a few other people, but then we can do whatever we want. And I think
we'll offer our house if you want to.
That'd be great. And if people don't want a house, they want a bigger space, we could see about using some of the spaces there, some of the bigger rooms they have. Are those open at the place where the meeting areas in Sun City, if we can use those rooms?
Well, they have the gazebo area, outside pavilion area we could possibly use, or we could go the Mexican restaurant, like Somerset, the restaurant outside of, the Mexican restaurant is very nice. They have a back room there. They're very accommodating usually.
And we can do it all, if you have Wi-Fi available. If not, I'll just use my phone as a hotspot, and then we can virtually do anything. So that's really up to what everybody. Maybe we'll take a time to kind of discuss if Next year, we're going to do a set schedule of things. Like this year, we're going to study this topic, or if we're going to do it where we choose a week ahead of time also, it's going to be really what we want and whatever everybody wants to do.
What do you recommend? What subjects haven't we handled?
Good point. It can be anything. If you want to do a year on Jewish prayer, if we want to do a year on, Jewish histories in different places, if we want to do, there's so many, a year on Jewish books, a year. I mean, there's a lot of options, or we could do just a difference. I mean, really, we could do, do a Melton course and see if the Melton will let us use their stuff. So there's a wide range of stuff we can do.
We never even finished the book that, the different faces of God. I thought there was many more chapters in that one, didn't we?
I thought we finished it.
I thought we did also.
I don't know if we went.
Maybe we didn't. Oh, well, we have to fix that. I thought we
there were a
finished.
couple of very, very good ones toward the ending.
Oh, maybe we did. I thought we got through all of it. All right, maybe we did.
Oh, maybe we
finish
didn't.
that.
Yeah, maybe we did.
But we could also, pick a wide range of topics, or again, there's a lot to do. It's why don't we take a week or so, and like maybe we could do it next week. And next week, instead of doing a class, just talk about what we want to do in the future and the dates.
Sounds good.
Because there'll be some, I think I'm going to take off a week or two at some point. And so pretty cool. So I think
How's
it's great.
April doing?
She's doing great. Yeah. She's
Good.
doing
Please
well.
send her our best.
Thanks. We all got the crud like everybody else. So my daughter, not really sick, but enough. My daughter had a little bit of fever today, so she stayed home as well. But we're all doing great. Hopefully I think my wife, the big news, I think she's gonna go with her mother, her sister, and my cousin's wife. And they're gonna take my daughter to Disney World to do the princess stuff. So.
Wow.
Because my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my cousin both had 2 boys. So they never been able to do it this way. And my mother-in-law, this is the first girl grandchild. So they're all very excited to be able to do this. So I imagine if you don't have girls, being able to take a 3.5-year-old to Disney World for the princess thing is a lot of fun.
Rabbi, what is on your chest?
This is Star Wars.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's-
I didn't have time. I mean, I literally had a meeting, and then I had another meeting that came up, and then another one right away. So it led right into this. So I didn't get to change my outfit. But I'm not wearing blue jeans, though. I'm wearing slacks. So that's pretty good. That's a change. You can decide for yourselves. Did I wear slacks today because of you guys, or did I wear slacks today because none of my blue jeans were clean? It's up to you. You can decide what you want.
Can you hold on for a minute? I might change out of the shorts. I didn't know it was formal today.
Yes, it's fun. That's right. Well, I interviewed for my job here when I was in Africa. I did it on Skype, and I had my suit, nice tie, but I made sure I wore shorts. So I was wearing, but that's how I interviewed for my job here.
Yeah, Arlene saw that.
I
'cause
saw that.
She was on the committee.
I was
Oh, were
on
you?
the
Oh,
search-
that's right.
I saw you. I saw you.
I was wearing shorts, by the way, at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh,
What was Arlene, what was your impression of the rabbi at the time you interviewed? Do you want to share that with us?
I was very impressed, even with the shorts.
I'm glad, because it was like 3:00 in the morning for me. So
Arlene, you're saying his legs is what got him the
yeah,
job.
that's pretty much how I got married too. I just showed the legs. So today, the discussion we had talked about was a really depressing topic: why Judaism has failed. So even though that is a depressing topic, we're going to talk about a little bit the direction Judaism's going and the issues we're facing, where we failed, but also where we succeeded. So I think it's a different world we're living in. It's seemingly like the world seems to change so quickly, so often, that it's hard to pick and say, hey, this is the worst age of all time. This is the best age of all time. We see the anti-Semitism, of course, especially online recently, usually perks up when there's a war in Israel. Obviously, Israel is made to look like it's all Israel's fault, and the other side has done nothing wrong, which we know is not true. But before we say why Judaism has failed, let's remember that today, almost every Jew lives in a democracy. Probably, I'm guessing over 90% of Jews live in a democracy. Over 90% of Jews get to vote for their political leader. 90% of Jews live in countries where they have the opportunity to go into most fields. There are very few Jews who live in dictatorships. Almost, the number is so small, it's almost not even, talking about a few in Egypt, a few in Iran, a few here, but most Jews obviously live in America, Israel, or Europe. Some in South America, of course, Jews in Russia. So in terms of where we're at and why Judaism failed right now, it is really good to be a Jew. It's been really good to be a Jew overall. And not that there hasn't been anti-Semitism and issues, but overall, comparatively speaking, the last 30 or 40 years has been a really good time for us. There's a lot of debate as to the effects of the Holocaust and how long of an effect that had in stemming overt anti-Semitism. As we talked about previously, some people believe anti-Semitism really was quelled because of the knowledge of the Holocaust until really they could find something else to create the new anti-Semitism, which obviously became the anti-Israel. But really, it is still a very good time overall. If we want to live in an age where there's no persecution at all for anybody, I don't know if that's ever going to be an age. Hopefully it will one day. We know that Jews are being persecuted in certain ways in certain places, but we also know that other peoples, African Americans, women, people who are gay, people who are different are being persecuted even more. So we got to start with that, saying, yes, we have to worry about anti-Semitism, but we're not living in an age where the czar has the ability to do whatever he wants to a very high percentage of the Jewish population whenever he wants. But yet we also know that Judaism has had the impressive career of thriving under dire circumstances. There's no reason that Jews should still be around today. We lived in societies where Judaism was the only outsider, and it would have been very easy to convert, and yet we didn't. Divisiveness on the outside world seems to galvanize Jews, and we actually increased in number exponentially while we were living in Eastern Europe under harsh times. And we know that the numbers just in Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and Russia, Germany, just the number of Jews just increased as never before in some of the worst time periods. What we're learning now is what our grandparents and great-grandparents prayed would happen. They prayed for opportunities to be part of the world, and Judaism had to figure out how to maintain its relevancy when we're not being persecuted, and that's where we are today. How can we remain Jewish, identify as Jews, in a time where anti-Semitism may be on the rise, but is still less so than it has been in the past? And I'll give the example that's obvious. Jews before used to be members of synagogues. It was just assumed. A very high percentage of Jews were members of synagogues in the early 20th century, probably to the mid 20th century. Now, assimilation, acculturation has given us the ability to do whatever we want. So how do we keep people Jewish in times like this? Any thoughts? I don't want to, usually people are talking, I don't want to, take over the conversation. No.
Okay, I have a modern day unique situation that is very disturbing to me. There is a 5-year-old boy next door who called a 5-year-old Jewish Russian girl across the street a dirty Jew. Now, this boy's father is a pastor of a Lutheran church. I don't think it's coming from him. I think it's coming from the mother. And they have alienated this little girl, which has made me so sad. So I don't know what to do. I went over there and I said I would do something special with her. Is that a good decision?
Oh, definitely. I think considering the anti-Semitism that we're seeing today, which seems to be emboldened because of all the anti-everything, it's imperative that we stand up for ourselves. I mean, in our locations, there is minimal anti-Semitism, mostly because we are out there meeting with people, telling people, no, this is not right. Do you think 50 years ago there wouldn't have been anti-Semitism in Sun City? If there hadn't been, if no Jews were there, it would have probably been rampant. If people are not continually reminded about these issues, then it will just get worse and worse. There's always the balance. Larry and Jane?
Yeah, and I just want to ask Noel a question. Were you a witness to it, Noel, or were there other witnesses who were actually there?
The mother of the little Russian Jewish girl who they live across the street told me, and she was so devastated.
But was she there at the time? Was she a witness to the?
The little girl was banished from my next door neighbor. I could watch it when I was out walking my dog. They would not allow her to come to their house. She was not invited to the little girl's birthday party. It just made me sick. What would make a 5-year-old boy call a 5-year-old girl?
No, what I was trying to get at was did anybody aside from the little girl who reported it, was there anybody else there at the time that they said, I could see little boys saying, I don't want girls at my party, or I could see other kinds of things, but
that kind of thing.
Well, I think in most cases, kids don't understand what they're saying.
Watched them over a period of time, push the
all I'm saying is I think you may have to verify that the little boy actually said it to the girl, whether or not that's my only concern is before you want, if there was somebody else there that actually witnessed him calling her a dirty Jew or some other derogatory anti-Semitic remark, or whether or not because she's Jewish, she felt she was excluded for another reason. That's my only point.
Yeah, it's not that.
Well, I think you see people, especially kids, repeating things they see in the news where they don't really understand the implications of it. And what I see from the perspective of Judaism is all of these issues we're facing with acculturation and assimilation is one of the best things that probably could have happened to Judaism. I see it from a different perspective, I think. My parents automatically and my grandparents automatically maintained membership of the synagogue no matter what. My generation did not. It has created an imperative within the Jewish world, and that is, if we don't get our act together, we're going to lose Judaism. Whereas before it was automatic, you could not be part of the outside society because you're Jewish. Now the outside society, for the most part, doesn't care. I mean, there's not going to be limits. You're not going to be, forbidden to work at this law firm or at this hospital because you're Jewish. And so this has made synagogues and Jewish organizations have to get off their tuchuses and start to be more active and make sure to go out and bring Judaism to the masses through programming, through study sessions, through more interesting services, through bringing families together. Whereas before, you could assume, you can't anymore. There's no assumption anymore that children who are born Jewish are going to remain Jewish or remain part of the Jewish world. It's just not there. Stuart.
Rabbi, I think there's a systemic problem that's part of this. I think the synagogue culture has changed very, very substantially from when I was a child. Many synagogues today, suburban synagogues, ex-urban synagogues, were formed essentially as social groups. And it used to be that when you had a synagogue, even if it formed as a social group or as a gathering place, there was a significant amount of Judaism going on. Now I see congregations in which the service keeps getting reduced and reduced and reduced. The holidays are relegated to notations in the bulletin rather than services, and rather than services at the correct time. And I think in that sense, the synagogues are to a great extent driving Judaism, driving Jewishness out of Judaism because it's changed. I've gotten to the point with a number of places that it's such a social club that I'm just not interested in going because it's not satisfying my Judaic needs. And what's happening is, I, for one, I'm not recommending it for other people, have really adopted Chabad to give me my Jewishness, to give me my services and whatnot, because Mikveh Israel accepted, I can't get it. There are congregations here where I go to services and there's no service. There's no service in my mind.
And that is what is I think that's a great dilemma, because if congregations, and it's not just congregations, it's Jewish organizations as well, don't improve. For instance, I mean, the obvious one is, 50 years ago, Jewish people donated to Jewish causes, and on a percentage. Now, because we're part of so many things, we're not giving as much time percentage-wise, which is okay. So if organizations and synagogues are not getting their act together, finding out what their congregants want, finding out the best way to give them prayer, finding out the best way to give them social network, finding out the best way to give them, services such as Life Cycle, then they're not going to succeed. And I think it means that we can't rest on our laurels anymore. It means that synagogues have to work harder and harder, just like everybody else. And it's like churches have to do the same. A church doesn't succeed because it's a Catholic church and they have money. A church succeeds because people are going there and doing things and it's vibrant. So what we're feeling in the Jewish world is very similar, I think, that all religions are feeling. Flossie, I think, and you're on mute, Flossie.
Okay, thank you. Going back to anti-Semitism, I have some very dear friends I've grown up with who are non-Jewish. And when so much came out in the news about anti-Semitism and with Israel, I heard from them and they were very upset, and they're very active in their church and said, we're going to say something. We know, in fact, one of them is Larry and Jane know Mikey. And she went and said, I'm going to speak up. So I think another thing is to have an open dialogue. I know you're very much part of with your wonderful podcast, but I don't think it should just be thrown on us Jews, because no, just making a comment, because we have very dear African-American friends here in Sun City and with other religions, and they've all said, when there's hate, there's hate. Where are they going to stop? So I think if not so much caring about us, but also saying, hey, they can come to me sooner or later too. And I think the dialogue is very important. And even going to my Texas friend there, if maybe children besides adults, but children talking and saying, evidently your neighbor and the mother and father, and especially him being a preacher, don't want to communicate, but it's children saying, you don't hurt someone. It's like hurting someone. You have blue eyes or you have pigtails. Well, Jewish, they might totally not understand another religion, but you don't separate people. You see what the commonality is.
Yeah, and it's not only see the commonality, you appreciate the differences. I think you're exactly right, Larry.
That's good.
Yeah, we sat in on the Zoom video the other day where they had the
anti-Semitism.
the day of the hour of anti-Semitism or so, and they did have.
I was going to do that. How to go? I was supposed to do it, but I ended up having had to do a visit.
No, I think they did an exceptional job in that they had a variety of speakers. They must have had about within the hour. They must have had each person speak for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. They were each very, very.
Oh wow,
short,
that many speakers! Wow.
Whether they were politicians or whether they were from mosques or whether they were from Catholic Church, a cardinal from the Catholic Church in New York, and they had people who were parts of the civil rights movement. Both parties, the Republicans and Democrats, all said the right things. So I think, and there are these hashtags now that you can go to sign up and and confront it. So I think there was a very wider recognition of many different groups that were now speaking out in favor of it. You're not going to change that small minority of people's minds, the ones who parade with the Nazi flags, and because they believe ideologically. I mean, the Ku Klux Klan was a religious organization. I mean, that's how they basically started. So I think you are seeing the fringes, and I think there are these these internet attempts, and I think that's what's really spurring a lot of this. The fact that the communication is so widespread and people latch onto it for one reason or another, ideologically, a superiority and things like that. But
it's something we're going to watch.
Yeah, I think that's true. But one thing I wanted to just go back to is that many years ago we had a book discussion group in New Jersey here, and one of the topics that came up as kind of a part of the book discussion group was if the world became Jewish in concept. In other words, we believed in all the ideals of Judaism, the Ten Commandments, and those kinds of commandments or just teachings. Would there be really a need for, it's almost a John Lennon thing, imagine kind of thing. Is there a need for religion? And we had a really interesting discussion. Of course, nobody could really come to any conclusion. Everybody had different things. But it's interesting in that what you said about democracy, and I've recognized that as well, that Jews live in democratic places. We were in Egypt, and they take you to the synagogue in Cairo, and nobody's there. It's really just a museum. It's not a participating synagogue. There are no synagogues that. Oops.
What just happened, Larry? We lost you.
Yeah.
I lost Larry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We just got a phone call. So what I'm basically saying is that it does seem like when you do live in a democratic society, and there aren't that many of them around the world, many of the societies are, I wouldn't say they're autocratic on the same range as North Korea, but when you do live in a democratic society, I think you do take the freedom for granted. It's almost like unionism, just to use an example. People belonged to unions when there was a need and when they wanted to band together and things like that, and then unions kind of disappeared for one reason or another. I'm sorry.
We can still hear you, Larry. We just lose your picture.
Okay, yeah. I'm getting phone calls.
You're a popular guy. We understand.
Yeah.
Say hi to the governor for me when you talk to him.
But that basically, I think the whole idea of democracy has basically hurt Judaism in that people feel more democratic. They don't feel as threatened. Like you said, even though, we do feel safe in the United States or basically in democratic countries. Well, Jane doesn't feel safe, but many of them feel safe in the United States, or at least safer here than we would in many
definitely
places.
Safer, but
safer, yeah, relative thing in this part of the world. And I think the democratic world has become Judaized. The thing I wanted to get back to in my original comment, and it was sort of a tongue-in-cheek one about, has Judaism failed? In other words, instead of putting it that way, really the question is, has Judaism failed? what was the original idea, of Father Abraham, if he was Jewish? I mean, we're debating he's the founder of three faiths, but we don't know. We're really saying, but he really wasn't Jewish, but he had this idea of, going away from idol worship. What was it? A unification of, all of the people of the world coming in this one belief of not to worship idols? Or did he believe in things like the Ten Commandments at the time? So, and I know Bruce Feiler wrote a great book about it. Yeah, it was prior to the Ten Commandments, obviously.
What was the reason? No, that's great questions. No, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, back to Larry. This little boy does not speak to me. He won't wave at me. I always try to be very kind to the children on the block because I've always had a wonderful relationship with them because I'm a former teacher. He ignores me. He looks the other way. And so I know that he has been in some way probably indoctrinated by the mother's side of the family. She closes everything up. It's just, to me, it's just horrible. I don't know what I can do except go to the little girl, the little Russian Jewish girl, and I know her family and try to do something with her.
Yeah.
No, you don't know it's the mother. A 5-year-old kid could have heard that anywhere. I wouldn't say it's the mother because you don't know.
Yeah.
No, I don't. But I know that the pastor, the father, we've had many discussions. He loves the Torah. We've talked about religion, and whenever we did, the wife would come out and say, "You got to come in right now." She didn't want me talking to him. It started out like that. I just feel, I may be wrong, but I don't think the pastor would. He went over to the family and apologized for what his son had done.
Well, and it's a learning session. And I think what we're seeing now is we have to be very careful as Jews who have been ingrained with the idea that Judaism needs to survive in difficult times. How do we thrive in times that aren't as difficult? And that's where we are today. Intermarriage is not seen as a terrible thing. Joining country clubs that aren't Jewish country clubs, or joining law firms, or being teachers at schools that are Christian schools, not a big deal if you're Jewish anymore. And so how do we thrive and keep Judaism alive during the time when we're all living in democracies? We can't be Jewish and just stress anti-Semitism all the time. If we are only Jewish because of anti-Semitism, then there's no reason to be Jewish, because it's basically we're just trying to, reject something else. The idea is, how do we teach ethics, teach history, teach Talmud, teach all of these values in ways that are going to have meaning for families in the future? And I think we're a lot better at doing it now than we were when I was a kid in the 70s and early 80s. Now I think there's a lot more opportunities for people to find their Judaism in a wide range of areas. We've got Hillel has grown, we've got Birthright, we've got youth groups that have exploded, Chabad, we've got the Reform conservative communities and Orthodox communities that are going out of their way to bring families in, doing anything they can. Whereas before, you just assumed they were going to do it. Now, every congregation, and I can guarantee you, almost every congregation you visit, Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, if there's a new family in town with a little kid and they have a chance to meet them and bring them in, they're going to do anything they can for them. They're going to basically open the keys to the castle for this family that has kids, because every congregation wants to have kids in the congregation. Stuart, I know you've been waiting. I apologize.
That's okay. I think, there's another side to it. Right now, I hear a ton of people preaching, take off your kippah, take off your chain with the Star of David on it, or a mezuzah on it, and that hiding, I think, is very counterproductive. And I think this whole attitude of it's not an attitude of protect your Jewishness or display your Jewishness. It's a question of hide it, which ultimately leads to the idea, be ashamed of it. So that's part one. Part two, what you just said, I have a big problem with a lot of this going after the new Jew in town, I guess is what I'll call it, because it's become competitive. We have congregations in this broad area that won't talk to each other, won't cooperate to each other. It's all a spirit of competition. Now, when I was in Atlanta, there was some of that going on, and Federation came in. Karen and I were very active in this part of it, and we brought 30 congregations together. If somebody came and inquired about Judaism in an Orthodox synagogue and said, this is too much for me, that synagogue would now say, why don't you go call to so-and-so? He's the executive director of the conservative one, because that's a place that fits you better. We say, if you don't join us, oh, they're not Jews. The Chabad is way too Jewish for us. That's a cult. That's going to suck you in and, right, force you there. Oh, and the Reform, they're not Jewish at all. They don't practice. The conservative is so busy trying to bridge the gap that they don't know what they're doing. And I hear that kind of thing. It drives me crazy. But I think that's the attitude that we're presenting. We're not presenting, not that we're not presenting a unity, we are not practicing a unity where we love each other. And I think that's a gigantic, gigantic problem.
Yeah, and I think that certainly is. And I know, I'm in a city where we have one of each. So it's not like a big city where there's multiple ones. And I think that is something that the city here is doing a pretty good job, but it's not done this well in other places necessarily. You're right. And it's something that, it's about having a larger view of the world. I know I was just talking to a congregant the other day. He came up to me and very nervous. He said, how's the conservative synagogue doing? Because he said, he's a member of a congregation, but he was worried that because he does not want the conservative Orthodox synagogue to fail in town. He wants them to be very successful so that people have opportunities. He doesn't want somebody to come to our synagogue because the conservative synagogue fails. He wants somebody to come to our synagogue because they want to be at our synagogue. So I think what you're saying is something that great that the Federation did that, and it's something that should be done. The competition is okay in some ways, but really the object of a synagogue is to hopefully find somebody a membership at a synagogue anywhere, no matter what they want. And so I know here when people come to me and they talk about conservative Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, I send them to the Orthodox or conservative synagogue. But I think you're right. It's but I think when it comes to young people and wanting them to come to the synagogue, I think that's still important. If a young family comes here, we got to make sure they know we want them. It is not a come and join us if you wanna, no big deal. It's no, we want you here. We love families with little kids. We're going to do everything we can financially, time-wise, and to make sure we'll do what you would, to help you find your way. Raising kids is more expensive today than it was when I was being raised. You need help with dues? No worries. We'll find ways for your kid to go to Sunday school. Money's not an object. We'll change times. You know what? We're not going to have meetings for this group at 3:00 on a Thursday because both of you guys are working, or maybe. So again, it's a balance. But right now, I know when I was growing up, if you came to synagogue, it's great, welcome. And now it's like, we want you to be part of this community. How can we help you? When people call me, I give them all the options of what's going on in Savannah: young adults, Orthodox, conservative, Federation, JEA, preschool. Here is the what's it called? The buffet. We're here to give you options. And I think, by the way, Ron, I think there's a call for you.
Pauline just went to let you know.
So this is where we're at. It's a very interesting and difficult place where right now. Now, anti-Semitism is, I think, a whole different aspect of it, because I think it was whoever said that hate is going to be hate. That's true. People are going to hate people no matter what. They're going to find a reason. Israel is not the reason people hate Jews in America. It's just an excuse, as we all know. But there's nothing wrong, and we have to be careful as a Jewish community. You know, there are some people who criticize Israel for what they're doing, which is fine. I have no problem with Israel being criticized. It's the difference between criticizing what they're doing and making them out to be the worst country on planet Earth, or making them out to be a place that doesn't deserve to exist, or that blames every issue 100% on Israel. Those are the issues we have to really make sure. So when people say, I feel bad for the Palestinians and what they're going through, I say I do too. I feel bad for the Palestinians as well. I have no qualms about saying that. I don't agree with how Israel handles their policies. Well, maybe I don't either, but it's the idea that we should be encouraging people to defend Israel and say, hey,
Unbelievable.
it is not the apartheid state. It is not the worst country in the world. It is not North Korea and Iran and Syria all united together with, South Sudan and the worst country in the world, which is what people make it out to be. And that's where I get nervous. Larry, and I think that was, Larry?
Yeah, I just heard, is it Rabbi Jill Jacobs is her name? Jill, do you know her?
I do know Jill I don't know her. I know Rabbi Jill Jacobs of her. I don't know what she just did.
I think she was on TV, and I saw her on several of the different talk shows. She was making the rounds apparently, and she was basically making the same point that
she does like Israel, she's a human rights rabbi person, very famous.
Yeah, I don't know where she's from
here,
but apparently she has a podcast and things of that nature as well, which I have not listened to. But she made basically the same point about criticism of Israel is valid. Whether you're Israeli citizen, a U.S. citizen, or whether or not you live in, in Cuba or South America, if you want to criticize a government, that's valid. But when you take it to criticize a nation because their particular, religious beliefs, she says that's not valid. You can criticize a government because of its policies and say you don't like its policies, like we do in the United States. We don't like its tax policies. We don't like its whatever it is, its voting policies or things like that. Totally legitimate in her view, but don't tie it into entire nation. And she made some very, very strong points. I think you could probably just if her name is Jill Jacobs,
there is a Rabbi Jill Jacobs who runs a human rights organization.
I'm sure you can go to YouTube and you can see some of her talks and things like that.
I can go right now. Give me 1 second. But also, I think again, one of the great things about that's a different word, about criticism. Where are you going to find the most criticism of Israel? If you go into Israel and read the Israeli newspapers, who are they criticizing? Their own government. That is a great place to be. If your newspapers can criticize your own government, then you're doing something right. If you're in a country where newspapers are not criticizing the government, that's not a place you want to live. And so, it's that balance. It's a balance between, and of course, who knows what's going on. It's very interesting. Everything in Israel changes. All of a sudden now it looks like there's a new government about to be formed. We'll see if it actually happens. I don't know if you heard about that, but it came out of left field for a lot of us who didn't. I don't even think Netanyahu knew it was going on. So we'll see what happens.
Rabbi, did you say a new government was formed?
They're now saying that Netanyahu's one of his chief lieutenants has been going around the corner and making a deal with a more centrist liberal group, the Litni, and so they look like they are going to be forming a government. Who knew? Without Netanyahu.
This group apparently is including the, I guess I'll call it the Palestinians, the Palestinian citizens of Israel.
Right, I think they'd be more like,
a better term.
not all Palestinians, so I call them maybe Arab. Yeah,
Yeah,
Arab Israeli.
but, they've got this sort of league of party put together, and apparently they're included in the coalition.
They are. In theory, they'll be very important because it is a very strange one. I mean, it came out of, obviously I'm not in the know, but this was not one that I'd heard of with Lapid and Bennett coming together. I mean,
Yeah.
it just didn't seem like it was possible, but it does now. So we'll see if it actually happens or not, but it's pretty interesting that you never know what's going to happen. Basically, I think some of the right wingers are not excited about Netanyahu and how he's been going. And so I think for whether you like him or not, he's got, and so we'll see if they can create a government. But we'll see. I mean, I think they haven't done it yet. They're still figuring it out. And I don't know if it's going to happen.
Right, they got to divide up the cabinet
But
position.
right now it's Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett. And so we'll see. And I think Bennett is going to be prime minister first. And then if it continues, then Lapid will do it next. But that'll be pretty interesting, especially if they bring in the Arab parties, which have been voting a lot more lately. So
The big question, I think, is
I think, Stuart, we can't hear you, although it doesn't say you're on mute.
I think the big question is going
We
to
still
be
can't hear you, buddy. Can everybody else hear him?
Yes,
Anybody else hear him, or is it just me?
now we hear him.
Or maybe I can't hear him. Okay, sorry. Something happened to my
I
computer.
think the big question is going to be if this comes about, whether the parties who are members of the coalition continue to behave and don't get stuck on their own specific issue and, pull out quickly. Then we're back to the same mess.
Yeah, I know, but at least it's an encouraging sign.
Absolutely.
How could they not get stuck on their own self-interest? It just seems to me, to be a ridiculous coalition when you have people who are joining together to get a voice in the government. They obviously want something, whether or not they're a right-wing party, whether they're an Arab party, whether they're a religious party. It just doesn't seem to make sense. I know that's the way parliamentary systems work, but it just doesn't seem to be able to draw in a few people.
We'll see.
There's a big difference between representing your interests and negotiating for it and stamping your foot and saying, I'm going to take my ball and go home if you don't give me what I want. And when I talk about behaving, that's what I'm talking about, that there's interest, there's discussion, there's compromise, there's respect for the other positions. And that's what we haven't, in the United States, that's what we haven't been seeing among parties. And if that goes on in a coalition of 6 or 8 groups, you're doomed.
It's very interesting because Bennett is actually right of Netanyahu, and he's ahead of a small party, and Lapid is head of a centrist, bigger party, probably more centrist, a little left. So we'll see how it goes.
But they're both really two-staters.
The two what?
They're both two-state solution people.
Bennett is not traditionally, unless he's changed. Has he changed?
Well, he wants to get.
Maybe
he wants to take away the influence of the Arab citizens in Israel. And the easiest way to do that is to make them not citizens of Israel, but citizens of some other state.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they could do it in a way that's safe, that would be nice. But, it was Begin who made the deal with Egypt, and Begin was very right-wing. So sometimes and Nixon made the deal with China. So that's sometimes what you have to have.
Yeah, I believe that's the necessity.
But so next week, why don't we'll come together and talk about what we want to do for the rest of the summer and how we want to meet. And again, I'm happy to continue every Wednesday. I mean, except when I'm on vacation, and then start coming in October and meeting once a month.
Yeah.
Tim is not going to be here, so we don't know how we're going to do our other study sessions, intro and Bible study. I may be taking that over as well, probably on Fridays. But he does such a good job. Hopefully he'll stay. Maybe he'll do it from Europe. I think we'll ask him. That'd be awesome.
When is Tim and Caleb leaving?
They are leaving, I think, in early August, but I think that he's leaving the synagogue next week or the week after.
Oh,
But he may still want, be able to come do a few things here and there, depending on how much time he has. But we'll start looking for somebody to take his place as soon as we can. And so we'll see if we find somebody. We're not going to just hire somebody. We're going to wait till we get somebody who's really, somebody who fits the position. Noel.
Yes, I'm so sorry I didn't start with him earlier because he was just been wonderful.
With Tim?
And now he's leaving, and are you going to get somebody else?
Yeah, we are definitely going to hire somebody else, but we're not just going to hire anybody to hire somebody. We're going to look for somebody who's so we'll start looking pretty soon, and we're going to be looking for somebody to do teaching, to work with young families, to work with Intro to Judaism class. So it may take a while, but hopefully, if you guys know of anybody interested, let us know. We're going to be working on the job description in the next week.
His last study session, I think, is going to be next Tuesday. I think he's going to do
Next
one
Tuesday?
more.
Yeah.
He's going to do the history of the synagogues, and it'd be nice if we can get a big crowd out to.
Oh, is that next Tuesday?
I think it's Tuesday at
Is he not?
6:30.
Is he not doing Torah study next Friday though? Also.
Oh, he may be doing Friday Torah study as well at 1:00. But the
Okay.
last thing he's doing, I think, before he leaves is the Tuesday history. So if we get a nice crowd out, I don't know if you get the word out.
That's a good idea. We should send that out. Yeah, I would-
to wish him the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the
And-
four of us are
And
always
what
there.
what we need to do is spread that word, not an hour before the meeting, but a few days.
Yeah, if you'll send it around to everybody, we'll put it on our Facebook and I'll have
Right.
Jennifer email it out. Flossie, I'm going to send an email to her right now before I forget.
We took his introduction to Judaism and, we knew a lot, but we learned so much, and his presentation, he's a wonderful teacher. It was truly great. And I've spoken to him since then, and he told me how so many of the people have contacted you about converting. So it shows
Oh yeah.
he did his job well.
Yeah, I've got 9 people in the conversion class, plus a couple others who can't make it. So, but a lot of people obviously couldn't convert last year. So probably by the end of this year, we'll have 10 people going through conversion.
We had a nice little discussion with him as far as the idea of conversion and why do people convert and where are they coming from? And he seemed to, he was Catholic before. And he said most of the people that he's come in contact with that have converted to Judaism are Catholic. And he thought that a lot of it had to do with the dogma of the church, the fact that, it was so ritualized that they wanted something that was much more liberalized. And that's why, they sought out Judaism, and particularly Reform Judaism.
Well, I
I
think
don't know if that's your experience. Yeah.
I know religions, some just don't fit for people. I think Catholicism is a beautiful religion. What is really interesting about conversion that we've seen is that rarely, although I have 2 now, maybe, do I convert somebody because of marriage. It used to be you converted because you wanted to marry somebody who was Jewish, but it's now because intermarriage is, done by so many rabbis that most of the time they're not converting to do that anymore.
Right.
In fact, I have more people who convert after they're married than who convert before they're married. So by far, actually, I'm working with 2 people now, which is rare. Both cases, they're marrying Israelis, but it's interesting. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Next week, we're going to talk about, I'll probably bring in a little lesson as well. Next week, we'll talk about what we want to do for the rest of the summer. And if we want to start in person and how we want to do that.
Rabbi, I don't know if it will come about, but one thing I'd like to do next week, even if it's just for a few minutes, is maybe give a synopsis of what's happening with the Israeli government if it
It's a great idea.
parties.
And you know what? It'll be a synopsis of the day because what was happening 2 days ago was not what's happening today. I mean, it was happening, but it was not on the news. And it really seems like even Netanyahu was thrown aback by this happening. So yeah,
Yeah.
who knows what it's going to be next Wednesday? For all we know, I actually am voting for Stewart to be prime minister, and that may happen. It's as likely as anything else happening. Stewart
Just
make
vote for him.
Aliyah. Stewart make Aliyah by Friday. Join the Knesset by Monday. Prime minister by Wednesday.
But Rabbi, it's interesting. In Israel, the right and the left still talk to each other. I can't quite believe this coalition that's forming now. That could never happen in the United States.
No, it was generally
We can't
speaking,
even talk to each other.
the two-party system has a lot of benefits above. Israel's politics is a
Right.
mess, but in some ways it's better that way. But we would not have 17 straight elections in America every 6 months because we can't find a president.
Right. That's another issue.
Well, the thing is that next Wednesday, you have a Hadassah board meeting. At this
Oh, okay.
time.
Yeah.
So we'll wait till do so lesson and we'll meet. And if not very many people there, we'll talk about it at a different time.
Right. It changes every week.
Well, Jane can tell Larry what she's thinking. Arlene can tell Ron. So
But Arlene uses the
Bossy?
computer.
Bossy,
yes.
Bossy, I
Yeah.
love your top.
Oh, good.
I love it.
You want me to send it to Texas?
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to see you next week.
Take care, everybody. Be
I'm gonna
well.